Hey everybody, John Mark here. Welcome to a video that, if you're anything like me, is going to make you jump up and down for joy. In this video, I'm going to share with you some highlights from the Constitution that Kurt Doolittle, the originator of Propertarianism, is in the process of writing. It is largely completed at this point from what I understand. And so today I'm going to share with you some highlights from the Constitution, and you're going to see what some of the policies are that are contained in this Constitution, and you are going to jump up and down for joy. So obviously I'm not going to go through the whole Constitution with you, but you're going to see that these policies that I'm highlighting here in this video are absolute kryptonite to the left and to the parasitic elites. We're going to talk about ending the corrupt middlemen bankers' ability to make the people debt slaves. We're going to talk about ending the Marxist indoctrination of our young people through higher education and grade school education. We're going to talk about fixing the epidemic of single motherhood. We're going to talk about ending the welfare state. We're going to talk about ending the ability for the elites and the bloated, inefficient government to steal money from families that are trying to pass wealth from generation to generation. So this is just the tip of the iceberg, but as you'll see, even the policies I'm outlining here are going to massively increase the quality of life of the people of the United States of America. So let's jump right into it. Before we go into these other policies, I want to make sure to mention the immigration issue. If you've watched my other videos at all, it goes without saying, at least portions of the United States of America, if not all of the United States of America, must hold land without any non-white immigration. Western civilization cannot survive the continued influx of people from the third world for a variety of reasons that I will not go into here, but I want to make sure to mention that before we go into anything else, and I'm not going to go into it in depth here. So let's go into these other policies. First of all, let's talk about ending the debt slavery upon our people by parasitic bankers. What you see there on the screen from the Propertarian Constitution: bypass the financial sector when creating liquidity, monetary policy, by direct credit of citizen accounts. So in other words, instead of bankers creating money out of thin air and making the government and the people pay interest on money created out of thin air, the Treasury itself brings money into existence instead of letting bankers do it. This is the way it was done before 1913, when the bankers took over the ability to bring money into existence. So Ron Paul fans, of course, Propertarianism wouldn't agree with Ron Paul on every single point, I'm sure, but on this point, Ron Paul fans, you can rejoice. We are going to end the Fed. There is absolutely no reason for private bankers to have the ability to bring money into existence and charge you interest on it. And I'm not going to go into an explanation of the scam that it is. You can easily find great resources on that on the internet. Just search Federal Reserve scam or something along those lines, and you will find a lot of great resources. The people of America under this Constitution will no longer be debt slaves. You will be able to pay off your mortgage in 10 or 15 years instead of 30. There is absolutely no reason for middlemen bankers to be profiting to the tune of billions and billions and billions of dollars simply by bringing money into existence and charging you interest on it. If you don't understand what I'm talking about or you're not sure about it, like I said, go research it. As you can see here, consumer credit will be issued by the Treasury, and this will deprive organizations, in other words banks, of profiting from the moral hazard of credit issuance and exacerbation of the business cycle. So in other words, he's saying here, the booms and busts that we experience are largely a function of the fact that banks are bringing money into existence. Sometimes they bring money into existence by lending out a lot of money. Sometimes they bring money into existence by not lending out very much money at all. Like we saw in the 2008 financial crisis, the banks stopped lending. And I won't explain the whole dynamic to you, but basically there's just less money in existence at that point, or coming into existence. And so there's less money for people to trade with. And it's basically the same dynamic as a pool with a bunch of fish in it, and the water level goes down and down and down, and there's not enough water for the fish to breathe in. So some fish flop to the top and they die. It's the same exact thing when you have these artificial boom and bust cycles caused by the banks changing the rate at which they bring money into existence. You give that function to the Treasury, you take it away from private for-profit bankers. The Treasury distributes money to the people directly without going through for-profit bankers, and all of a sudden your people are not debt slaves from cradle to the grave, and everybody's lives The average person's life gets so dramatically easier that it's almost hard to explain to a modern person who's never known anything but debt slavery what it would be like. But it's not that complicated. It's very simple. So like I said, if you want to go research it, you can, but this is a very simple fix. This is something that many people have been calling for. Obviously not people in the current system of power, because they don't want to lose their privilege of being at the top of this system, but millions upon millions of people now in Western civilization understand that modern banking is a scam and we need to get rid of it. This Constitution does the obvious thing and just gets rid of it. So if you think about implementing something like this after a shakeout in the United States of America, which there's going to be, as you can see from some of my other videos, it's pretty much unavoidable at this point. After a shakeout, if and when we have a chance to implement something better, a lot of people will accept what we're doing just because of this alone. Just because they can pay their mortgage off in 10 to 15 years instead of 30 years. Just because we're going to free them from debt slavery, they will accept what we're doing and not fight against it, because it's going to make everybody's life so much easier. So if this one by itself doesn't make you jump up and down for joy, it's only because you don't understand it. Once you understand it and you see what this Constitution does, a very simple thing of returning the ability to bring money into existence into the hands of the Treasury rather than private for-profit bankers. I have no problem with profit, obviously, from a genuine good or service that provides value to people. But bankers do not provide value to people other than giving them a place to keep their money. The lending aspect of bankers is a scam. It's charging interest on money created out of thin air, and it's just an unnecessary parasitism upon our people. So we're going to get rid of that. Next, let's talk about the education system in America, higher education and even grade school education. Let's start with grade school education. Here's a line from the Propertarian Constitution. Regarding education, provide vouchers for education through grade 12. In other words, you have a choice of how you want your children to get their education and where you want your children to get their education. If your tax money is paying for it, you should have a choice. Very simple. Here's another few lines. Add economics, accounting, basic and property law to the curriculum. Why isn't this taught to our young people today? If you look at our education today for our young people in grade school and high school, it's obvious that the education system, our public education system, is not designed to give them a good education and make them smart. It's designed to make them stupid sheeple. So we're going to change this. Look at the other lines here. Restore scientific history, technological history, geography, economic history, and take all this political stuff out where the teachers can give them political indoctrination. Restore logic, debate, rhetoric, public speaking, and require the teachers above 6th grade to demonstrate ability in this. Add etiquette, manners, ethics, morals under reciprocity. In other words, teach them the basic, simple, empirical morality of reciprocity that propertarianism talks about, and require the students to adhere to that at all times. So you see some fantastic additions to the curriculum, and elsewhere in the Propertarian Constitution here, it talks about disbanding the Department of Education and a couple other departments that are completely useless and are parasitic upon our people rather than being helpful. Now let's look at higher education. First of all state financing of research shall be limited to the STEM plus law fields. In other words, no research grants for feminist studies and all this kind of garbage. And then this is really the death blow to the Marxist indoctrination camps that our universities have become. Instead of lending money to the students, you lend the money to the universities with the stipulation that those loans have to be paid back by the universities within 10 years of the student graduating. And the way they have to pay them back is with payroll deductions from the student after they graduate. You can't do it any longer than 10 years after they graduate. And if the universities cannot recover that money from the student through payroll deductions after 10 years of the student being out of university, the university takes the hit. The university absorbs the loss. So in other words, the universities are on the hook for the loans, and what will happen because of the incentives created by this is the universities will no longer be able to parasite upon our young people, and especially our young women who seem to be suckers for this, with all of this fake social science that's not even science, it's pseudoscience, gender studies, and identity politics, and all this Marxist garbage that they teach. All of that will be cut out completely because the universities will not be able to recover the money from the students students on this because it doesn't increase their earning power. It's just garbage degrees. And then you look at number 2 here, limiting university loans to fields whose calculations are warrantable. In other words, where you can actually test a person to see if they know how to do something practical. I mean, how do you test whether somebody understands gender studies? It's all pseudoscience anyway. So you limit university loans to STEM plus law, and you do not allow them to change the definitions of these fields. And what will happen as a result of these 2 policies you see on your screen here is 3/4 of universities will shut down, or they will turn into trade schools, which is what they should be anyway, most of them. These 2 policies right here drive a dagger through the heart of the Marxist indoctrination that happens in our colleges and universities today. They simply will not be able to do it anymore because they have to actually provide a service to the student in the form of increasing their earning power with an actual skill, rather than just bringing them in, charging them all sorts of money to teach them things that are either outright false or don't do them any good and are just a waste of time. And our students are spending 4 years of their life going into debt up to their eyeballs for something that doesn't do them any good and in fact harms them greatly and harms our society greatly. So these 2 policies here want to make me pump my fist in the air for joy as well. Now let's go on to ending the welfare state. So you'll notice here, these policies don't say that there can't be any redistribution. Now, if you've watched my other video on parasite-proof government, you'll understand that propertarianism puts a limit in place on any kind of houses of government that you have or whatnot, so that the houses of government and the people that are making policy cannot implement or pass any parasitic policy. So I won't explain that all here, but it's important to understand that under propertarianism and propertarian law, it's not like you couldn't have any redistribution to help people who are less well off. It's not like you'd have to have a completely heartless state, but what you would not have is you would not have people who are just pure parasites like we have today under our current welfare system, where the inner city women are having more and more babies out of wedlock because the more babies they have out of wedlock, the more money they get from the government every month. So unless the person is physically incapacitated in some way, as you can see here, they have to work. And if you don't behave, if you do a bad job, you lose your benefits. And the government could also provide some work that is of value to the nation or to the local region where the person lives. But this is just one glimpse you see here of how we're going to end the welfare state. No more parasitism, no more free riding, and we can have some help for people, but it's not going to be for free if the person is at all able to work. In other words, it cuts out the parasitism. Cutting out a lot of government waste as well. Look at this. All non-military government pensions shall be terminated because it's just extractive parasitism upon the people. Why should these government workers get these fat, cushy pensions when the people of America are taxed out the wazoo to pay for it? It's ridiculous. The Departments of Education, Health and Human Services, Housing and Urban Development, Labor shall immediately be terminated. All these departments just serve as an arm of parasites. And I love this line. And any resistance to getting rid of these departments shall be punishable as an act of treason against the people. I love it. Now let's talk about the tremendous problem we have currently with single motherhood and the divorce industry. And as a preface to this, I've heard Kurt say something that I think is wonderful, which is really the focus of right-wing policy is the generation and maintenance of health of long-term multi-generational families. And of course, the left is trying to tear the family apart at every turn. And the parasitic elites put tremendous financial pressure on families with kids, and it disincentivizes them from having kids. You're taking tax money from well-behaved, middle-class, working-class people and transferring it to welfare mamas who are having a bunch of kids out of wedlock and collecting benefits from taxpayers. It's absurd. That ends. So one of the main focuses of policy has to be the health of the family. So you see here, a marriage consists of a corporation between a man and a woman for the purpose of reciprocal friendship, affection, sex, care, economic discounts from a shared household, the production of generations of offspring, and insurance against the vicissitudes of nature. The polity ensures and shall ensure these marriages by priority in commons and insurance from non-interference in exchange for prevention of the moral hazards of single parenthood, orphans, and generations with various fears and traumas who may be untrained in the disciplines, habits, norms, laws, traditions of the polity, all of which impose involuntary and indirect costs upon others. So what this is saying is that single parenthood, especially single motherhood, you look at all the statistics, When a kid grows up without a father in the home, their chances of getting into all sorts of bad results in their life skyrocket. And this imposes involuntary and indirect costs upon the rest of the people in the nation as well. So a huge focus of policy has to be eliminating this form of parasitism, not only, of course, for the sake of the people, but for the sake of the children. So we see here, this top line, look at the top line. Interference in the marriage of others that results in its termination shall create a liability for damages incurred. So in other words, if a man is married to his wife and I go sleep with his wife and break up the marriage, I can be brought into court and have to pay damages for breaking up that marriage because I'm ruining that family's life. I'm ruining the children's life. I'm imposing a cost upon the rest of society by ruining that family. I love this. This is awesome. And then look at these other policies. End all child support and alimony as destructive to family and just destructive in general to society. What we have now is a divorce industrial complex where women are incentivized to end a marriage at the slightest inconvenience because they can and because they get cash and prizes. To the point where now many men are saying, I'm just not going to get married because it's too big a risk. Anytime the woman wants, she can just up and leave. She gets alimony. She gets money from me. I can hardly ever see my kids, and my kids' lives are ruined, and my kids grow up in single-parent households, and we know from the statistics what that does. So what happened was a while back, the court said, we don't want to try these marriage cases anymore. We just want to have no-fault divorce. Well, that is a disaster. That was a very bad decision. Over 70% of divorces are initiated by women. And of course, there may be some that are legitimate, obviously, if there's actually physical abuse or something like that. But right now, it's just way too easy for a woman to destroy a family for whatever reason. So you restore prenup agreements. You get rid of child support and alimony. You restore fault and divorce. So if there's going to be a divorce, it's not just a woman handing over a piece of paper and that's it. You have to prove that there was some kind of a fault, that there was something bad that was done in court. It makes it much harder to get a divorce. There has to be an actual reason and evidence for that reason, which if there's real abuse, it's not hard in most cases to produce that evidence. But if you're a woman that just wants to up and destroy your family because you're bored with your man and you want a new adventure or whatever reason, under these policies, it's much, much harder to do that, which is great because if our kids grow up without both parents in the home, we know from the statistics, it is devastating upon them and upon our society. If this doesn't make you jump up and down for joy, I don't know what to tell you. We implement this. Can you imagine our civilization? Can you imagine the health of our families? Can you imagine the health of our society? All right, one more. Let's talk about being able to transfer wealth down through the generations. No taxes, fees, regulations, or other encumbrances shall be imposed upon the transfer of assets between members of a family by one generation in any direction. Inheritance taxes in all their forms shall be prohibited. The right to families to accumulate and transfer wealth in all of its forms between generations shall not be infringed. Oh man, I love this. So these policies, folks, this is just the tip of the iceberg, like I said, but these are some of the most important areas. And as you can see, it's basically a dream for us right-wingers who hate everything that the left and the parasitic elites are doing. This Constitution is kryptonite to these scum. I want to close by putting on the screen a couple of great screenshots from the Declaration that starts out the Constitution that you can see on Propertarianism.com. Look at this Declaration of Grievances. I love seeing a lot of it in one place. Look at these grievances that we have against our current government. Let me just highlight a couple of them. The construction of a vast, privileged, parasitic, unaccountable bureaucracy. Oh, absolutely. The submission of our sovereignty to predatory and hostile international institutions. You see how the United Nations is trying to call the shots in the United States of America. The submission of our sovereignty to hostile foreign treaties. These deals that the globalists try to make with everybody. The suffrage of arbitrary legislation. This is what propertarianism gets rid of. It returns the judiciary and our rule of law to doing what it's supposed to do, which is to enforce reciprocity and kill parasitism. The circumvention of the Constitution. Obviously, the purchase of political influence in pursuit of privileges against interests hostile to the people. In other words, corrupt politicians, special interest money dominating politics. The use of pseudoscientific economics, accounting, financial device, and deception. Absolutely. Government agencies using measures to measure what's going on in the economy that cherry picks what's actually going on and ignores the parts that are not good for the people. The forcible payment of interest on fiat credit and irreciprocal privatization of the fruit of that commons. That's what we were talking about earlier with the bankers. The destruction of intergenerational lending. Hostile immigration by intention. Of course, our elites have been importing hostile immigrants. They don't care that they're hostile because it serves their purposes. The failure to secure our borders, obviously. The failure to secure our information, absolutely. The militarization of our police forces, trying to make the police into something that's against the people rather than serving and protecting the people. The arming of our bureaucrats. The submission of our people to search. I love seeing all of these grievances against our current government in one place because this is our moral authority, because it helps us to understand that our government does not care about us anymore. Our government does not serve us anymore. And this is another reason why I keep telling people there's going to be a civil war in this country. Not that I'm calling for that. I would call for a peaceful separation. That would be ideal. But unfortunately, that's unlikely to happen. But there are so many people in America, not just people on the right wing. I was talking about this in an interview that I was doing the other day. There are many left-wingers that want revolution, and they don't really understand as well what's wrong, but they just know something is wrong. But listen, you remove the debt slavery that our people are in, you get rid of these middlemen bankers and restore bringing money into existence to the treasury so that people can pay off their house in 10 to 15 years instead of 30 and this kind of thing. You're going to make even many left-wingers extremely happy by doing that. And a lot of the angst in our society is going to go away because people aren't going to be debt slaves anymore. People aren't going to be so unhappy because their lives aren't going to feel like such a grind. That's why this is so powerful, folks. That's why this is a solution that can stick, because a lot of people will love it, not just right-wingers. And the far left will have a hard time working up much resistance to it because, well, if this is instituted, they'll either have just lost a civil war, so they'll be in no position to dictate anything, or they'll have just agreed to some kind of a separation, so again, they'll be in no position to dictate anything. So the far left isn't going to have a say in a scenario where we would be implementing this. And if you look at what this does, how much better it makes the average American's life, you're going to be able to get a lot of people to agree with this, even people who wouldn't consider themselves right-wingers, because we're getting rid of the corrupt politicians. We're getting rid of the scum bankers. We're getting rid of these people that everybody knows are filthy scum, and that benefits everybody. So that's all I've got for you today. Keep an eye out for my upcoming videos that are on the screen. You are not going to want to miss a single video that I put out, so make sure you're subscribed. Thanks, everybody. Till next time. How much longer do we want to play trench warfare with the left? How many more times are we going to have to fight this battle? You know what my answer is? 0. 0 more times. This is going to be the last time. And if that doesn't get you excited, I don't know what will.